if this camera were to suddenly start refocusing past my ugly mug onto that wall behind me, I'd have to take it in to get it fixed because it would mean it wasn't working properly, but also you would see no fewer than 9 different embodiments of Bram Stoker's Dracula. That is to say, there's 9 of them. Sorry for trying to sound fancy on YouTube.
Back to my point. I love vampire movies. In fact, you can trace my lifelong horror fan origins directly back to vampire lore. At the age of 6, I had surgery, and while I recovered, I was given a book to read.
Yeah, that's right. They used to let you recover in a hospital long enough to read a book.
Somebody dressed up like Ronald McDonald came in and handed me a paperback novel and said the boy in this story's named Jonathan too. When the morphine wore off, I realized the book was Bram Stoker's Dracula. I also realized it was actually my mother that handed me the book. She was a redhead back then. Now normally you'd think, frickin' hell, handing a book about an undead, blood-drinking fiend to a 6-year-old badly weakened child so they can read it while they're alone and in pain in a dark hospital ward sounds like child abuse. Given the delicate state of some of today's youth, I'd say it probably is child abuse now.
But nobody told me it was meant to be a scary thing, so instead I got fascinated by the detailed descriptions and foreign cultures, and I wasn't afraid of what might be lurking in the dark. I was intrigued by it. I ended up obsessed with vampires at a very young age, and that led to an obsession with everything else to do with horror, and that led to this YouTube channel. But enough about me.
When I heard Chris McKay was going to direct a new Dracula film, it didn't exactly get me doing carpet zoomies. The Lego stuff he's edited and directed has been funny, especially when you watch them with your nieces and nephews. The Tomorrow War didn't do much for me, but it wasn't a poorly done film, it just wasn't my kind of thing.
But then I heard Nicholas and Nicholas were starring in the movie, and the carpet zoomies kicked off.
Without giving anything away, this movie's about a real estate agent named Renfield, played by Nicholas Hoult, who's tricked into becoming Dracula's servant. But 90 years later, he's come to a point in his life when he realizes he's not himself and he's no longer the free man he once was. He decides he can't take it anymore, and the story's essentially about him regaining his independence and self-worth.
Director Chris McKay has really surprised me. This movie is full of creative violence and outrageous gore and well-balanced humor and copious quantities of cocaine. And all of it is underpinned by a surprisingly touching underlying message.
Nora Lum, aka Aquafina, plays Rebecca Quincy, and she does exactly what you'd expect her to do in terms of performance. Ben Schwartz plays Teddy Lobo, a criminal gang leader. Nicolas Cage plays Dracula. He's not in the movie as much as you might want him to be, but as he's pointed out, this movie is called Renfield. And finally, Nicholas Hoult plays the titular Renfield.
Both Cage and Hoult are no strangers to scary movies.
Recently, Cage has done Mandy and Color Out of Space and Willy's Wonderland.
We don't talk about his version of the Wicker Man on this channel.
Cage even has experience playing vampires. Sort of. As per his lead role in 1988's Vampire's Kiss, which is well known for all the same reasons his version of The Wicker Man is. Hoult had a big hit with 2013's Warm Bodies, where he played another pasty dead character as a zombie in recovery.
Both actors said the costumes and the makeup went a long way to connecting them with their characters in Renfield. Hoult said the pale makeup and the lack of self-grooming, along with the minute details of his suit, right down to the little worn spots in his trousers that Renfield might have anxiously picked away at, helped put him in a mindset of exhausted subservience. Hoult took inspiration from previous iterations of Renfield and tried to imagine the kind of mindset he would be in nearly 100 years later with a head full of regrets. Nicolas Cage, who is quick to remind everybody he's not the star of this movie, said they went through several different versions of Dracula's look before they settled on the one that we see on screen.
His non-traditional fangs came from makeup artist Christian Tinsley, who wanted Cage's Dracula to look similar to Lon Chaney's look in London After Midnight. If you haven't seen that already, it's pretty frickin' creepy. Cage said all the ceramic material in his mouth made it very challenging to speak eloquently as Dracula would. So he took the teeth back to his trailer every night so he could adapt his speaking patterns.
As for the character itself, Nicolas Cage is Nicolas Cage channeled through makeup.
In terms of the character's inspiration, Cage said Dracula is a combination of Anne Bancroft from The Graduate and his father.
If I did have a gripe, it would probably be down to Cage's screen time. I'm aware this is Renfield's story, but I can't seem to get enough of Nicolas Cage doing his thing this last couple of years.
The pacing was super impressive. It's a great mix of blood-soaked action and slower, character-focused scenes that end up creating a surprisingly strong emotional connection with the Renfield character.
There were a lot of terrific fight scenes in Renfield, especially towards the end of the movie, and given it was R-rated, it was a lot bloodier and gorier than I'd anticipated, given the premise and the cast.
And on that subject, visual effects nowadays are so advanced, we're accustomed to seeing anything we could possibly think up in our heads, and we barely notice it anymore.
So now it's becoming more about using the VFX appropriately for the story, as opposed to as a show-off session for the highlight reels. And I am happy to report the CGI in Renfield is in service of the story, as opposed to trying to make it the story.
The story itself addresses some universal human sentiments, and over the course of the 1 hour 33-minute runtime, Renfield learns lessons about life and himself, and there's an actual redemption at the end of his story arc.
And finally, horror and comedy are both very challenging to get right. They require intelligence and a deep understanding of timing and subtlety. Trying too hard to scare somebody is the exact same thing as trying too hard to make them laugh. And that's why combining them for horror comedy is exponentially more challenging. Not only do you have to get the scares and the laughs right, but you have to find a perfect balance between them.
Make the tone too funny and the horror elements won't be taken seriously. Make the movie too scary and the jokes will feel intrusive and inappropriate. As a result, I think I could probably name 5 total horror comedies I'd say got it right.
Yeah, boy!
But I am happy to say I will be adding Renfield to the tiny list of horror comedies I think have been done properly. If my opinion means anything to you, I would highly recommend you checking this movie out, and if it's at all possible, do it in a theater so you can take full advantage of all the fast-paced action scenes and the blood splattering. Thank you for watching, folks. Until next time. It's me, Johnny, from that thing you just watched. If you enjoyed it, go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe. And if you want to watch another thing, there's one right there. Do it!